podcast.
All right, what's going on, Fight Bros podcast listeners? Coming at you today with Cryptid Files number 5. I've got a great one in store for you today. I've looked up to this gentleman for a long time. I've been a fan of his since I was in middle school. So he's one of the top cryptozoologists in the field. He's a big time author, lecturer, and TV personality. I've included a lot of his books at the intro of this podcast and links where you can go find those. As I mentioned, he's been on TV, so you've probably seen him on the History Channel, the Travel Channel. A lot of people recognize him as that guy with that cool hat. So without any further ado, Mr. Ken Gerhard, thank you for coming on the podcast today, sir.
Well, thank you, Marcus. I appreciate your kind words and your longtime support and interest. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, sir. So I'll kind of start it out today just for our listeners to kind of give them a good view of cryptozoology and an intro into that. I have people ask me this question all the time, and I'd like to get you to answer it just to start us out, right? So what is kind of your definition of cryptozoology to give our listeners a basis of this category here?
Yeah, well, obviously a lot of people don't know what cryptozoology is. It's kind of a fringe discipline. You know, aren't a lot of people involved in it these days, but basically the word cryptozoology, the literal translation from Latin is the study of hidden animals. So essentially what we're doing is we're researching evidence of animals that are hidden from science or not been officially described and documented by scientists. So a lot of times these are also kind of legendary creatures like Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, the Chupacabra, Thunderbirds, Black Panthers, things like that. So there's a whole host of large, mysterious animals that people have described all over the world, not only in modern reports, but also in like legends and long-standing traditions. And so, you know, I go out and I investigate those claims and see if there's any proof that any of these things actually exist.
Yes, sir. So as we mentioned before, and you just mentioned a little bit, so, you know, your full-time gig is being a cryptozoologist. So kind of going off what you just said, what credentials does one have to be a cryptozoologist to be, you know, listed as a cryptozoologist in articles and on some of these TV shows?
Yeah, well, cryptozoology is not an officially accredited or recognized science. It's kind of, some people call it a pseudoscience. I like to think of it more as kind of a fringe science or citizen science, as we also call it. So I don't have any official degrees in zoology or anything else. I wish I did, but I didn't do that when I was younger in life. But so anyone can technically call themselves a cryptozoologist, Marcus, but in order to make a living at it, and there's not many of us that do, you obviously have to put a lot of work into it in terms of understanding, you know, not only all the different facets of cryptozoology, the cryptids that are reported and the evidence and the history, but also you have good understanding and knowledge of zoology, anthropology, animal behavior, ecology, all those things, because it's all pertinent. And, you know, personally, I get by with my book sales, and I do some television appearances and lectures and things. And it's, you know, just enough to make a living. I'm certainly not rich, nor is that why I do it. I just love what I do, and it's a lot of fun. So, but you know, anyone out there can become a cryptozoologist. And I often have young people that will email me who are in high school or college and are like, hey, how can I get into this? And I try to give them the best advice I can.
Oh yeah, I love it. I was interested in high school, and you know, after I kind of throughout college, and as I've gotten older, I've just been full force into it, especially reading your books and stuff. So I've always been a huge fan. I know you get that.
Yeah, I dig your enthusiasm.
I know you get this question a lot, probably on every podcast, but as you mentioned, cryptozoology is not, there's no degree or anything to make you be a component to be listed as a cryptozoologist. So, why cryptozoology? During your upbringing, I've heard you explain this on some podcasts, but it definitely gives a good basis of who you are. So why cryptozoology, and what led you into this field?
Yeah, I didn't. It is a great question that everyone asks me. I didn't plan on becoming a cryptozoologist. It's just been a lifelong passion ever since I was a young boy. And what I always tell people, of course, Marcus, is that I was growing up, I was very much into creatures and animals. I had a lot of exotic pets as a kid, small alligators and snakes and salamanders. And so I loved all those different kinds of critters and things, but I also loved monster movies growing up. I was always into Godzilla movies and Creature from the Black Lagoon or whatever. So when I first heard about cryptozoology, I was about 8 or 9 years old. I saw a TV show about Bigfoot, and I just it's like a switch flipped, that there was this mythical creature / monster, unknown animal running around in the woods of North America, allegedly. And so growing up, I studied it quite a bit. And I also traveled with my mother, who was a adventurous spirit and a travel agent. And she took me all over the world. So I got to do some really amazing things as a young person, camp in the Amazon and Galapagos Islands, Australia, Africa, Asia. So, and then at age 15, I was at Loch Ness in Scotland, which is famous, of course, for the Loch Ness monster, Nessie. So even at 15 years old, when my family vacationed at Loch Ness, I was investigating with a movie camera and a pen and paper, interviewing people. So it's just been something I've done my whole life, and I didn't plan to make it a career, but I've been very blessed and just worked very hard at it.
Yes, sir. That's the best thing about it. So, I got to know a lot about you in your book here, The Essential Guide of Bigfoot. You mentioned in there that you're also a musician. And I haven't really heard you talk about that too much on some of the podcasts you've been in. And you said you pursued a music career for about 20 years. So I just wanted to know a little bit about that. And what genre of music are you a musician in?
Yeah, that's true. After high school, I started a band in high school, and we were pretty successful as far as my little town went. So I had illusions of pursuing music. I pursued this music career for about 20 years. The genre was kind of what we refer to as industrial, which is basically electronic, lots of synthesizers and drum machines, but also heavy guitar and really dark, so it was kind of like Nine Inch Nails or Rob Zombie, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And had a lot of fun. Got to tour around the continent and recorded many albums, opened for some big acts like Motley Crue, and it was a lot of fun. But after 20 years, just a very hard life being a musician, very intense, and I guess I burned out a little bit. So there was actually an overlap period. The last few years as a musician, I was also rekindling my interest in cryptozoology. And so as my band would tour around the country, I would also take side trips when I had a day off here or there, or an opportunity to go check out a location where there was a Bigfoot sighting or something else, Dogman or whatever, So there was kind of a time there when I was doing both. I don't do music anymore. I kind of, for fun sometimes. I do have some software and keyboards and things, so sometimes I'll just play around and have fun with it. But I certainly don't have enough energy these days to to balance both of those things. So
you mentioned that while you were doing your music, that you would branch off and do some of your cryptozoology. Uh, I I just ordered your DVD,
Hmm.
American Monster Tour, with you and fellow cryptozoologist Lyle Blackburn. So that's where you got your idea from for that title to that documentary, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Lyle, who is a good friend and really like a brother, and he and I look so much alike, which is not planned. He was also a musician in a kind of a gothabilly punk heavy dark band, and so we both had similar hats. And but we met each other years ago, and we've worked on different investigations together. He's a very accomplished author, has written some excellent books, and has also done visions. And but he still does the music. His band is called Ghoul Town, and they're actually very popular in Europe and all over the place. And so he still, uh, you know, does gigs and records albums. I don't know how he does it because, like I said, I don't have the energy for that.
Yeah,
But
busy
anyways, that
schedule.
was kind of the genesis for our idea, because we were yeah, cool new concept, and we thought, well, we're both musicians and cryptozoologists, investigators. So let's combine those two things, because when you're a musician, a lot of the romantic aspect of being a musician is life on the road, right? And you're cruising and doing gigs all over the country and meeting people and stuff. So,
Yeah.
so we just tried to incorporate those two ideas into American Monster Tour. And thank you for seeing the DVD.
Oh, you're welcome. No, I love the idea. That makes so much sense. Combining those two together there. So my next question here, Ken,
Very nice.
what what's kind of your favorite cryptids or the cryptid creatures you focus on the most? Now, I've heard you in other podcasts say that you would recommend like cryptozoologists focusing on cryptids that are maybe near them for multiple purposes like time and money. So I'd like to know, what your favorite cryptids are, and does that impact uh, for those that are near you?
Yeah, man, honestly, it's hard for me to choose favorites, Marcus, because I love all of the, many cryptids in the field of cryptozoology are fascinating. I guess I tend to focus on whatever I'm working on at the time. If I'm writing a book on one, then I'm all in on that one. Or if there's a TV show coming up where I have to cover something, then I research the heck out of that. So I go around. I'm a generalist. Excuse me. Bigfoot is obviously the rock star of cryptozoology, but there are other cryptids that are equally fascinating. But to your point, and I think this is important to anybody that wants to get into the research, you really should utilize what I refer to as the home field advantage. So, because it does take a lot of time and money to do a proper investigation. So if you're going to do that, it is kind of a good idea to focus on something in your area, because you'll have more access via travel to get to the spots and to interview people and set up camera traps and monitor, all kinds of things. So for example, I live in San Antonio, Texas, and we've had a long history of Thunderbird accounts from
Yeah.
around this area. By Thunderbird, I mean like these giant monster birds that people describe, huge, way bigger than any known bird, like 3 times, 5 times as big. Seems to be a lot of those reports around San Antonio through the years. So uh, I love San Antonio as a city, anyways, but I focus a lot on those Thunderbird accounts, because that's what I've got in my backyard, basically. It's just,
Yeah.
I can investigate Bigfoot too, but I have to travel a little bit more. And, the same for other types of cryptids, lake monsters or whatever. I just have to do more traveling. So, which is
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good point. I kind of took your advice on that. Um, my sister and brother-in-law, niece and nephew actually moved out to Florence, South Carolina, um, and I kind of thought, I was like, I think there's some type of major cryptid near here, and actually 20 minutes away from Florence is where the lizard man sightings were. So I've actually been to that lizard man museum,
Oh
and
yeah, right on.
yeah, I read Lyle's book on that once I found out how close that was. So I've really been into that here lately, just because we've been making some trips down to Florence, and the museum's about 20 minutes away from them. So I took your advice on that one. But
Very cool, man. Yeah, I haven't made it out. I'd love to make it out there. Yeah, that sounds like a fun one. And yeah, I've read Lyle's book too. I haven't had a chance, unfortunately, to make it out there to South Carolina. So I'd love to check out that museum. That sounds cool.
oh yeah, and see, I'm about. I haven't got to check out the Mothman Museum, but I'm about 3 hours away from there, so that's pretty close to me. I was very much looking forward to coming to the Mothman Festival for 2021, and I hated that got canceled. I was ready to meet you, and Lyle was supposed to be there, I believe. So I was looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's a great conference. Unfortunately, they've canceled it 2 years in a row,
Yeah.
2020 and 2021, due to the COVID situation. But hopefully, we'll get that back going again. It's a huge event. In the past, they've had, like up to 10,000 people over the course of the weekend, and of course, it's outdoors through the whole town. But still, that's a lot of people. But yeah, I'd love to see that one get up and go again.
Oh
And
yeah.
hopefully Lila and I'll make it up there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to going to that one. So you've mentioned the chupacabra a little bit ago. Now, I believe you're a volunteer at the San Antonio Zoo, and I believe you've said in the past y'all have a chupacabra exhibit up there. Could you talk a little bit about your volunteer work up there and that exhibit, if you don't mind?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so I'm a volunteer educator at the San Antonio Zoo for the past 6 years, also known as a docent. And I volunteer my time up there, and I love to talk about all different types of animals. I may be interpreting the bear exhibit one day, and the next day you'll find me at the Komodo dragon or okapi or whatever. So I just love to move around the zoo and talk about the animals. We call it interpretation, where you're basically giving visitors at the zoo a little bit of extra education on what they're seeing. But the San Antonio Zoo already had a long history with cryptozoology, which is one of the reasons I wanted to volunteer there. This goes back to 1957, when the San Antonio Zoo sponsored the first official Yeti expedition that a zoo has ever sponsored. It's called the Tom Slick Expedition, and that was a pretty big deal back in the 50s. And through the years, people have brought alleged chupacabra remains to the zoo. Back in 2004, this guy claimed he shot a chupacabra, and they brought the bones up to the San Antonio Zoo, and it turned out to be a dog of some kind, a canid.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the zoo had that history, and I guess they also knew that I was there. I mean, they didn't consult with me or anything, but last year suddenly there was a chupacabra exhibit, and they asked me if I'd come in and do some presentations and talk about it. And so that was a lot of fun. It's actually not a bad, it's not an unknown animal. I guess I'm not.
No, yeah.
Hopefully, I'm not giving away any big surprise there when I say no. It's not a legendary creature, but it's fun, and it's a fun thing for people to come and look at. And there's a little sign there that tells a little bit about the chupacabra history, but they keep it. We have a little section with the bats where it's real dark. Bats like it dark, so there's like the nocturnal animals, so it's
Oh
kind of in
yeah.
there. And they actually have a sign up too. As you're walking down the main trail past the jaguars, suddenly there's a sign that says chupacabra that way. So it's all in good fun. But yeah, I don't know how long it'll be there, but at least for now, that's kind of a cool thing that the zoo provides a
Yeah.
little extra entertainment. So
Yeah, that's great. I'd love if a zoo around me had something like that. So moving on to the next topic here. one of my favorite shows you've been in, I believe it was called In Search of Monsters. And I believe you did
Oh yeah.
an episode on there dedicated to the Minnesota Iceman. And I know you've had a lot of experience with that case. So can you tell me a little bit about, you know, the Minnesota Iceman in general? And I know on that episode, I believe you made the claim that you compared the original photo of the Minnesota Iceman compared to what is there now, and you felt as there were some differences. So could you just explain a little bit about that case?
Yeah, the Minnesota Iceman, many fans of Bigfoot in particular will have heard of this particular story, but it was called the Iceman because it was dead and frozen within a block of ice. And it looked man-like, except it was covered in fur. It had kind of a death grimace, very powerfully built. And it was called the Minnesota Iceman because there was this guy in Minnesota, Frank Hansen, that owned this thing. And he would travel around to carnivals and fairs and charge people money to come in a modified tractor trailer and look at this in this big glass coffin. He had this frozen, dead, man-like creature. Got these side shows, you know. But the interesting thing about it was that back in the late 1960s, two scientists went and studied it because they had gotten a tip that it might be real and not like a made-up, fabricated thing. And they got to study it for 3 days during the winter. Not thawed out. It was still frozen. The guy that owned it, Hansen, wouldn't thaw it out, but he let these two cryptozoologists, the two fathers of cryptozoology, Bernard Heuvelmans and Ivan Sanderson, studied this thing for 3 days. They took photographs, they took sketches, they took notes, copious notes, and they were convinced it was real. They didn't know what it was, but they said, this is a real hominin, the hairy man-like creature of some kind. It's dead, and it's something killed it, and it's in this block of ice. Well, story, and it gets fascinating, but it's very complicated, Marcus. But essentially, law enforcement took an interest once word got out that these guys had studied it and thought it was real. And the Smithsonian Institute, the FBI, took an interest, and they thought, and then Hansen thought he might get in trouble, I guess, and kind of disappeared for a couple of months. And then he resurfaced back on the carnival scene, announcing that he had basically switched, and now he had a model of the Iceman that he was going to show. But the original Iceman, he was going to, it's like, so it's just this whole conspiracy thing, and it's gone on for years, and it could have been a Bigfoot or something like a Bigfoot. I guess that's why it's important. There's a theory that Hansen actually found this thing in Vietnam because he fought in the Vietnam War, and that maybe he smuggled it back from there. And nobody really knows the story. It could be a hoax anyways, but yeah, you're right. On In Search of Monsters series we did for the Travel Channel, I was given an opportunity to study this thing. We melted the ice down, not all the way, but pretty far. And I compared it, the one that's now being displayed at a museum in Austin, Texas. It's called Museum of the Weird. They have a Minnesota Iceman display. You can go look at it. And I'm pretty sure it's the same thing that I saw when I was a kid back in the 1970s. I saw it at the Minnesota State Fair, and it's not real. It's a model. So, but it's different from what these two scientists described, took photographs of, and took notes about. Yeah. So to me, at least, you'd say there were two different things. And one, there was a switch, actually a switch done by Hansen. And so then the great mystery is, what happened to this original Minnesota Iceman that these two cryptozoologists studied? Was it real? Did Hansen make it disappear because he didn't want to get into legal trouble? Are the remains out there somewhere waiting to be rediscovered? And what was it? Was it a Bigfoot, or was it something similar to a Bigfoot? Or yeah, it's a pretty fascinating mystery. But like many things in the Bigfoot field, it's controversial, and the trail is kind of not to use a pun, but the trail is going cold because, it's just everything happened so long ago. All we know is that there's a version in Austin, Texas that people can go look at. And, I'm, it's not real, but it's cool looking. It's worth checking out. It's very cool, but it's not flesh and blood. I guess that's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
It is real. It's not flesh and blood.
So you said, that's why I wanted to ask you about this, because I know you had firsthand experience. You got to see this when Frank was traveling the country with it. So you just claimed that what you saw.
Well, in the 70s, yeah, I did see it. Yeah.
So you claim what you think you saw.
Yeah, what I saw in the 70s
is probably the same. That's what's in there right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I remember the teeth, lots of teeth, and that's one thing you can see in the version that's in Austin now. But the version that was photographed and documented and described originally in 1969 was said to only be showing 2 teeth. Its mouth was closed. So that's one difference right there.
Okay, so sticking on the topic,
it's a cool mystery. I write about it. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I think we just lagged for a second. You're good.
Sorry. Go.
You go ahead, sir.
Yeah, we got a lag. I was just going to say, if people are interested in the Minnesota Iceman, I've written about it in a couple of my books, and there are a couple other good books out there that talk about the Minnesota Iceman story. It is a fascinating mystery.
Yeah, that's been one of the most kind of Bigfoot stories, encounters that I've liked to hear about. Especially, I'd recommend, if you have Discovery Plus or something going on there, and looking up the Minnesota Iceman episode where Ken is in predominantly the whole show, one of the main people in it. But kind of sticking on the topic of Bigfoot here. You talked a little bit about in your book, The Essential Guide of Bigfoot, and your encounter, a possible encounter that you've had. And what I found prevalent is you said it was about 50 miles away from the Lake Worth monster. That's kind of this blurry white Bigfoot kind of picture we have. Is that correct?
Yeah, he basically nailed it. I had an encounter, I think it was August 18th, 2003. I was with 3 other researchers about 40 miles north of Lake Worth, Texas, at a place called Cottonwood Lake, and we heard something grunting at us through the brush. It sounded very loud, powerful, big, and it sounded very ape-like. And I've got those sounds recorded. We couldn't see it. We tried to flush it out. Couldn't really do that. Moved to a higher vantage point and used a spotlight, and we saw some eye shine or something from that spot. Camped there, heard this thing throughout the night, moaning and wailing. And the next morning, we finally found some footprints, human-like footprints that were very deep. We found some turtles that it had ripped up, literally ripped the shells in half. So that was the most convincing thing I've ever experienced that I think had to be Bigfoot or Sasquatch, because I couldn't come up with any other explanation as to what made those sounds. Granted, we're all those of us in that group were all grew up in the outdoors of Texas. We've heard pretty much everything out there. So this was something different. And yeah, it just happened to be 40 miles north of Lake Worth, which, as you said, is famous. It's a spot in Texas, just outside of Fort Worth, Texas.
Yeah.
Back in, again, I think we're talking about 1969 here, where this thing in July was seen around the lake, and it was a big white colored Bigfoot or something. So actually, when we had our encounter at Cottonwood Lake, the original plan had been on that weekend to go to Lake Worth and do some research there. But they were actually doing some construction or had at that time. So we diverted, and the guy that I was with said, well, hey, I've got some Bigfoot reports, recent ones from this little lake just near there. And that's where we went. And that's where I had that encounter that to this day I can't really explain. So
That's amazing. So based off your encounter that you had in 2003 and what you've done up to present day, do you 99% for sure think that Bigfoot, Sasquatch does exist?
I use 90%.
Okay.
Because, and I still think that's pretty generous, but the reason I say that, Marcus, is because I try to pursue cryptozoology through the prism of traditional science and zoology. And within a scientific methodology, there are very few things that are ever 100%. There's always a reason. Most scientists will always leave. You have a workable hypothesis, and maybe you've tested it and challenged it, and you still think it's the best explanation for something, but there's always a chance that you could be wrong, and that does happen. That's science. So theories are overturned, and new discoveries are made, and new data and evidence comes up sometimes. So in that respect, I say 90%. I'm 90% convinced Bigfoot exists, and it's not just because of that experience that I had, but it's also spending decades. I've interviewed hundreds of eyewitnesses. I've seen evidence all over the continent. I've evaluated all of, thousands of sightings, vocalizations, footprint casts. There's so much evidence, Native American legends. So based on everything as a whole, I'm 90% convinced Bigfoot exists, but I can't say 100% until I see one with my own eyes, and that hasn't happened yet. So
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I appreciate where you really bring science into your approach and into being ethical on some of these topics. I really do appreciate that. So sticking on the topic of Bigfoot, like you said, this is the rock star of cryptozoology. I remember on Facebook Live a while back, a few years ago, you were raffling off this book here, The Creature. And I kind of looked into it.
Yeah. Yep.
And I ended up getting it, and I was just blown away by what's in this book. I mean, there's really big claims, to kind of summarize it to some of our viewers who haven't heard it or read it. Pretty much the gentleman in this book at his cabin pretty much befriends a Bigfoot through apples being on his porch, and they kind of develop a friendship throughout the book, which kind of a spoiler, it ends with the death of the Bigfoot and, some controversial claims after that. But I just wanted to talk to you, what do you think of this book? Do you think it's very credible? Or I know it's hard to, I just feel like I want to believe this book's real, some of the claims in here and stuff. I just feel like the author goes into such depth on some of these topics.
Yeah, for sure. The book is from 1973, as you said. It's called The Creature, and the story is that it was written by a college professor, but he wanted to remain anonymous, so he signed the book Jan Clement. And nobody ever knew if the story was real or if this guy actually existed. Well, and there are some remarkable claims. So I'll answer your questions two different ways, Marcus.
Okay.
The first thing is, as you know, by reading The Essential Guide to Bigfoot, my general opinion is that Bigfoot is a species that has adapted avoidance behaviors towards humans. That is, it realizes or recognizes that we are its greatest threat, will likely hunt it to extinction or, run it off the face of the earth. And therefore it typically avoids humans, except when it accidentally gets caught in situations. So from that perspective, and I think that's a reasonable way to look at it, it doesn't make sense that Bigfoots would befriend certain people. that wouldn't fit into the paradigm of that behavior pattern where suddenly Bigfoot would say, hey, I'm going to start hanging out with these humans over here. So I'm always skeptical about claims of people that, and it's called habituation is what we call it in the Bigfoot field, where people claim that they are friends with Bigfoot or are communicating with Bigfoot. I'm skeptical about those claims. The other thing is, 2018, I was at a conference up in Pennsylvania, and I saw a pretty good lecture from one of my colleagues, Steve Coles, the Squatch Detective, did a presentation. And he and this other researcher up there, who unfortunately can't think of the name, it's escaping me, did a deep dive into this book and went to the copyright office and tried to get a lot of information. And it seems like that this is probably most likely now a fictional book. The guy that claims to have put it all together in terms of getting the professor to write the book and helping him publish it was known to have written fictional books and to have used the pseudonym Jan Clement. And often the other books that he wrote had a lot of elements of the creature in terms of dealing with animals, mystery, and having some, well, forgive me for saying so, some sort of erotic components to the, and thing too. So
the incident with the cat.
All in all, it seems like, So I don't know. It seems like there's sufficient evidence that it probably is a work of fiction based on the Bigfoot phenomenon. But who knows?
Because one of the claims I was kind of pushed back by was when he claimed he lured the Bigfoot in the car to drive it away, because in the book he claimed, I guess, people were kind of catching notice he felt like the Bigfoot was going to get caught. And he dropped it off 200 miles away from the location, and he claimed that it came back within 24 hours. And I believe it said in there bears.
Yeah, that's a pretty big
80 miles in a day. So that's a very major claim.
That's a great point, Marcus. And also the claim of even getting a Bigfoot into a car. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about presumably animals that could weigh anywhere from 800 to 1,000 pounds, that are like 8 feet tall. So, I mean, it just doesn't seem like something that would be really easy to get into your car in the first place, right? So,
yeah, yes, sir.
It's a great, it's a fun book, though. It's a fun book if people want to check it out, but I wouldn't put too much stock in it.
Yes, sir.
I wouldn't.
Yeah, because one of the things, too, it claimed that, at the end when, it died from the flu, or it claimed some type of sickness like that he buried it, the body, he cut it up and buried it with a metal steering wheel on the top for somebody to find. And I guess that was kind of another main thing. But yeah, I guess we'll kind of leave the Bigfoot talk at that. I could talk to you all day about so many cryptids, but kind of wanted to get into another one of my favorite ones here. I guess we would consider this a cryptid. I guess you've heard, I think I've heard you talk on this subject a little bit. The story of Indrid Cold. I've read the book that Woodrow Derenberger wrote on that, and his daughter wrote a sequel to that. I've actually did a podcast, so some of the listeners do know the backstory on Indrid Cold. I kind of dedicated a whole podcast to that. So have you read his Derenberger's book and his daughter's?
No, I have not heard. I'm afraid I've not read their books.
Okay.
But, I'm familiar with the basic story because it's woven into the Mothman prophecies and some of that stuff. So it's and UFO lore, which is not my specialty. So here's a good point to make a distinction, which a lot of people, cryptozoology was originally designed to be the study of unknown animals, but it's kind of the term has evolved. The term for cryptid has evolved through the years, and now people tend to add in other things that, like the Indrid Cold story, since your listeners are familiar with it,
Yeah.
Sounds like something more that would be related to like the UFO phenomenon as opposed to an animal. You know, we're talking
Yeah.
about kind of metaphysical, cosmic things. So I do find it fascinating. I love all that stuff. You know,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I think it's really interesting, but not I'm not as knowledgeable about Indrid Cold as I am about the Mothman, for example. The Mothman, I don't think was an animal either, but it had a lot of animal-like features.
Yes, sir.
And for a long time, people were referring to it as the bird, the Mason County bird, and there are Thunderbird reports from West Virginia where you have that. So I mean, that's more in line with what I study, but even still a little far out there in terms of making a case for an animal. So I don't know. I'm not trying to throw water on your question. I just don't know
Oh,
what I think it's an interesting story, but I don't. I can't really make a good case for or against Indrid
yeah.
Cold and what it represents.
I just kind of wanted to see what you thought on that subject because I know in your book, Essential Guide to Bigfoot, you talk a little bit about possible UFO sighting you had. So I was just curious to see
It's
if you
true.
read those books because they kind of go deep
I
into
think I've
that.
seen a UFO.
Yeah,
I do. I am not saying it was aliens because I don't know. It could have been experimental or military or something dark. I mean, who knows? I just didn't know what it was. So I think most Americans, here's an interesting stat for you, Marcus. And this fluctuates from year to year, but I think they've done surveys and probably like 60 or 70% of Americans think UFOs are real,
okay.
and that there's something out there, ETs or aliens or at least UFOs. Pretty large percentage of the population. Only about 22% of the population of those same people think that Bigfoot could be exist. So literally almost 3 times as many people are open to UFOs and aliens than Bigfoot, which I'm not judging. It's
Yeah,
just kind of an observation. So for whatever reason, people are more open to the possibility. And so Indrid Cold, which I don't know, you tell me, Marcus, does that sound like there was some type of extraterrestrial connection or something there? Didn't he get like visited or contacted? And
yeah.
so,
And in the books, it's kind of like
and it could be real. I mean, I'm not saying it could.
yeah. And I mean, in the books, it kind of the injured cold figure kind of followed them throughout their life until his death. So yeah, they're kind of claiming more of extraterrestrial, um, which is interesting. Um, I'll kind of get into the last major thing. I didn't
Yeah.
want to leave this out because I know we're kind of winding down on our time here. I did message you this photo yesterday because I wanted you to see it in high depth. But this was about 20 minutes away from me. I live in Pulaski, Virginia, so this was taken in Wythe County, Virginia. We don't really have too many Bigfoot sightings around here. So this was caught on a
Okay.
trail cam in 2013. Um, and
Okay.
I'll kind of put it here. That's the original newspaper one of it. But I sent Ken more of a high quality picture of it yesterday. The gentleman did not release his name, but he he did claim that he found this on his trail cam. Um, he said in here that the image appears to show fingers as the animal grasps the base of the tree stump, and it also has elongated feet similar to a man's appendages. So that's all the article really said about it.
Hmm.
No, it's never got brought back up in our newspaper. It never kind of got answered, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I do appreciate you sharing that. I always like to see interesting photographs and things, um, trail cam shots. So I can say I'm pretty darn sure this is a real animal. This is not a fake Photoshop or a hoax or anything. But in my opinion, the first thing I thought of is that it's a mangy bear. And I say that because I've seen lots of photos of mangy bears that people have sent me. And you got, keep in mind that first of all, Virginia, I think, has a pretty healthy population of black bears. I'm sure you guys
That's
have at
correct.
least 10 or 20, maybe 30,000 black bears in the state. So they're not uncommon. Bears do get mange, which is a condition where the hair falls out. And a lot of animals that get this, raccoons, dogs, monkeys, whatever. Mange is a really weird, well, think about it this way. I mean, animals, Marcus, look very strange and foreign and alien to us when they don't have their full coat of hair that we're used to seeing. So, animals tend to have like a thing called underfur, which is like the base layer. And then they'll have like an overcoat or overfur that they shed or that changes colors and different things. So that's what we're used to seeing. When animals get sickly and they lose their hair and they look weird. They don't look, recognizable. And this thing, it does look kind of ape-like, I guess, because of the way that it's kind of hunched over, and it appears to have, to me at least, people could interpret that to be kind of an ape-looking thing.
Kind of
but if you look closely at the photo, but look how the limbs are all basically the same length, right? And they look pretty short compared to the body. So, I mean, this is the back leg here. I can see it looks, it looks longer because there's not as much hair on there. So it's kind of skinny looking. But the back is very flat. So I don't know. And, I said, I encourage your listeners to view and Google photos of mangy bears, and they'll see what I'm talking about, how they can look really weird, particularly from behind like that, because you can't see the head. So it just looks like the body looks kind of simian. It looks like a simian or a primate, but I can't say for sure, but that's kind of where I'm leaning on that photo, that it's merely a bear.
Yeah, and originally when the photo came out, that was kind of the two things. It's either a bear with mange or possibly a Bigfoot. Kind of for the Bigfoot community, it was the things we were holding on to, I guess, was the length of the arm. And it kind of looks like a cone-shaped head a little bit, like rounded off. But
well, I think that might be the hump on the back of the kind of built up the muscles, the trapezius muscles.
But I do agree.
Who knows? It's fun. It's fun to speculate.
Yeah, I agree. I've looked up the, bears with mange, and that looks kind of very similar to that photo. But, that was kind of in 2013 when this came out, that was got the community talking a little bit about Bigfoot. So that was nice.
Oh, that's cool. Well, it's always fun when people start talking about Bigfoot.
Yes, sir. So kind of last question here to end it off. Your last book that I believe you put out last year was, I haven't got a chance to read it yet, but I did get it, The Essential Guide to Loch Ness. So I'm very excited to read that, especially with how good The Essential Guide to Bigfoot was. And I believe you're currently in the show The Proof Is Out There. I've watched a couple of shows. Is that still going on right now?
Well, thank you for mentioning, Marcus. I don't know if they've wrapped up the season yet. We just finished season 2 and The Proof Is Out There, and I think I appeared in I don't remember how many episodes, a bunch. But hopefully they'll bring it back for a 3rd season. I've enjoyed doing that one.
Yeah, I've enjoyed.
They don't allow me to wear my trademark tattoo. Can argue over that, but it's a good show. They bring up videos, just you just did, photos and videos, and we analyze it and give different opinions and try to come up to a conclusion. So I am currently, but you can certainly find The Proof Is Out There, all the episodes, if you have the History Channel app, or they might also be on like Amazon Prime or some other streaming services where people can check them out. And I'm on a bunch of episodes of that. Anything having to do with a weird creature, cryptid, animal. So it's been fun.
Yes, sir. So kind of with the new year coming in, what's from what you can tell us, what's kind of in store for you for 2022, for what you can tell us?
Well, thanks again for having me on, Marcus. Excellent questions. I really enjoyed our discussion. I'm working on planning some expeditions for 2022 at the moment. Definitely a strong chance that I might go to Tasmania and search for something called the Tasmanian tiger or thylacine.
Yes, sir.
That's of course if the epidemic lets up. I've got some Bigfoot expeditions I'm planning. Um, I don't know if I'm going to write a book this year, but I'm also going to be appearing on several conferences. There are different Bigfoot conferences around the country, and also a few like paranormal conferences that I'll be. So I'll be touring around, lecturing, doing some expeditions, filming some TV stuff, and you know, that's about it. That's about all I have planned for now. But things always come up, so we'll see how it goes.
Yes, sir. So to our listeners, if you're looking from where you can follow Ken, I've included that at the beginning of the podcast. All his social media pages for Twitter, Instagram, his Facebook page, his YouTube, and his website. You will be able to see a link
Thank you.
at the bottom of our description, a hyperlink where you can click on Amazon to go straight to from where his books are located if you'd like to know more and keep following Ken. And Ken, I just want to tell you, it's been such an honor to have you on the podcast. As I mentioned before, I've been a fan since I've been a kid. And when I started this podcast, it was my goal to get you on, and I didn't think it happened. So I'm glad that you took the time out of your day to come on the podcast. It's been such an honor, sir, and I'm looking forward to what you're going to do in 2022 because huge fan here.
Well, thank you, man. The honor is all mine. As I said, I appreciate your support and interest, and thanks for having me on your show.
Yes, sir. Ken, I'll just stop this recording right here, and then